The morning of March 15th, 44th BC, dawned grey and still over Rome. Clouds hung low in the sky like a shroud, and the city seemed to move through its routines with an uneasy quiet. In the theater of Pompey, where the Senate had convened that day, history held its breath. Then, in a frenzy of violence that lasted only minutes, 23 daggers found their mark. Gaius Julius Caesar, dictator of Rome, conqueror of Gaul, the man who had crossed the Rubicon and reshaped the world, fell beneath the statue of his old rival Pompey. His blood pooled on the marble floor, as if Rome itself were drinking in the moment. The conspirators, led by Marcus Brutus and Gaius Cassius, believed they had just performed the most righteous act in Roman history. In a grotesque ritual, they dipped their hands in Caesar's blood and raised their daggers high. Then, with the confidence of men who had just saved the Republic, they stepped out into the streets of Rome expecting a hero's welcome. Instead, they were met with silence. Not the silence of awe, but something far more chilling. The silence of a city in shock, heavy with fear and gathering rage. Doors slammed shut. Shutters closed. The streets emptied as if an invisible plague had swept through. This was not consent. This was the calm before the storm. What the senators, in their aristocratic arrogance, had catastrophically failed to understand was that Caesar was beloved by the legions who had fought under his standards, and adored by the common people who had benefited from his reforms. To them, Caesar was not a tyrant, he was their champion, and these men had just murdered him. The assassination did not restore freedom to Rome. Instead, it unleashed something far more terrible: Rome's vengeance. What followed was a merciless, methodical manhunt that would span years and continents. The ancient historian Suetonius later recorded a chilling fact. Of all those who wielded a dagger against Caesar that day, not one survived him by more than 3 years, and not one died peacefully. The machinery of retribution began with an unlikely alliance forged in fury. Mark Antony, Caesar's battle-hardened general, joined forces with Octavian, Caesar's 18-year-old grandnephew and adopted heir. Together with Lepidus, they formed the Second Triumvirate, a political weapon designed for one purpose: vengeance. To finance their war and eliminate potential enemies, the Triumvirate resurrected one of Rome's most terrifying tools: the proscription lists. Anyone whose name appeared on these lists became an outlaw. Their property was confiscated, and any citizen who killed a proscribed person received a reward. It was institutionalized murder, sanctioned by the state. Rome plunged into a bloodbath not seen since Sulla's dictatorship. Hundreds of senators were butchered. 2,000 members of the equestrian class were hunted down and slaughtered. Old scores were settled. Personal vendettas were disguised as political necessity. The city descended into paranoid chaos. This orgy of violence was merely the prelude to the main event: the systematic destruction of every man who had raised a hand against Caesar. Brutus and Cassius had fled east to raise armies, but vengeance was already catching up with the lesser conspirators. Gaius Trebonius was among the first to fall. He had played a crucial role in the assassination by detaining Mark Antony in conversation outside the Senate chamber, preventing him from rushing to Caesar's aid. After the murder, Trebonius fled east and secured the governorship of Asia, believing himself safe behind fortress walls. He was wrong. Publius Cornelius Dolabella, an ally of Antony, came with false promises of alliance and gained entry to Smyrna by night. Trebonius was seized from his bed and tortured for days. Finally, he was beheaded, and his severed head was kicked through the streets by soldiers like a ball. The first conspirator had paid the price. Perhaps no fate was more tragic than that of Decimus Brutus. Often forgotten by history, His role in the conspiracy was arguably the most insidious. Decimus had been one of Caesar's closest friends, even named in his will. On the morning of March 15th, when Caesar's wife Calpurnia begged him not to go to the Senate after dreaming of his murder, it was Decimus who persuaded Caesar to attend. With the practiced ease of a trusted friend, he mocked Caesar's superstition and personally delivered him to the slaughter. After the assassination, Decimus attempted to flee north with his legions, but the soldiers' loyalty belonged to Caesar's memory. One by one, the legions deserted him. Entire cohorts defected to Octavian and Antony. In the end, Decimus found himself alone, disguised as a Gallic peasant, wandering the forests with nothing but the clothes on his back. A local Celtic chieftain who recognized him saw an opportunity and sent messengers to Antony. The response came swiftly: execution. Decimus Brutus, who had once dined at Caesar's table, was beheaded in a forest clearing far from Rome. His head was sent south as a trophy. The true reckoning came in October 42nd BC, when the largest Roman armies ever assembled faced each other across a dusty plain near Philippi in Macedonia. On one side stood the Avengers, Mark Antony and Octavian, with 19 battle-hardened legions. On the other were the liberators, Brutus and Cassius. This was a battle for Rome's soul. Republic or empire, freedom or order. The first battle erupted in chaos. Brutus surprisingly overran Octavian's camp, but Cassius suffered a crushing defeat against Antony on the other wing. Cassius retreated to a hill to assess the situation, but dust choked the air, and he couldn't see clearly. When he spotted riders approaching, he couldn't identify them. They were actually messengers from Brutus bringing news of victory, but Cassius, in his despair, convinced himself they were enemy cavalry coming to capture him. In that terrible moment of misunderstanding, Cassius made his final decision. He would not be taken alive. He ordered his freedman Pindarus to kill him with the very same dagger he had plunged into Caesar's flesh 2 years earlier. The irony was almost too perfect. Cassius was destroyed by the same weapon he had used to murder Caesar. When Brutus reached the hill and found his co-commander dead, tears streamed down his face as he spoke the eulogy. The last of the Romans. Brutus knew the cause was already lost. For 3 weeks, the armies stalked each other. Supplies dwindled, morale deteriorated. Ancient sources tell us that Brutus was haunted by visions during those dark nights. A massive shadow allegedly appeared in his tent. "I am your evil genius, Brutus," the phantom supposedly replied when questioned. "You shall see me at Philippi." Whether real or hallucination, the psychological weight of the assassination bore down on Brutus with crushing force. On October 23rd, the Second Battle of Philippi began. This time, there would be no miracles. Antony's veterans crashed into Brutus's lines like a hammer. The battlefield became a slaughterhouse. Brutus, seeing his army disintegrating, retreated to a rocky outcropping with a handful of loyal followers. He understood what awaited him if captured: chains, humiliation, public execution as entertainment for the mob. He chose a different path. As the sun set, Brutus quoted Greek tragedy: "O wretched virtue, you were but a word, yet I followed you as if you were real." Then he asked his friend Strato to hold his sword steady. Brutus composed himself with stoic dignity and threw himself onto the blade. Mark Antony, when he saw Brutus's body, felt genuine sorrow and ordered it wrapped in his own purple cloak, the highest honor a Roman general could bestow. Octavian, however, showed no mercy. He ordered Brutus's head severed to be thrown at Caesar's statue in Rome. But the ship carrying it sank in a storm, and the sea claimed the head of the last great Republican. With the deaths of the leaders, organized resistance collapsed. But the hunt continued. Servilius Casca, who had struck the first blow against Caesar, likely fell at Philippi or chose suicide. The other conspirators were tracked down one by one, betrayed by slaves, murdered in their sleep, cornered by Caesarian loyalists. Yet one man evaded the net longer than anyone thought possible: Cassius of Parma. After Philippi, he fled, attaching himself to whichever faction seemed most likely to protect him. For 14 years he lived on the run, always moving, always looking over his shoulder. He survived through cunning, luck, and desperate willpower. But Octavian, now Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, had a very long memory. In 31 BC, after his final victory over Mark Antony, Augustus dispatched an operative to Athens, where the last assassin believed himself safe. Cassius of Parma was sitting at his desk writing when the door opened. The assassin crossed the room and drove a blade between his ribs. With his death, the final chapter of the Ides of March was written. The circle had closed. The men who murdered Julius Caesar believed they were saving the Roman Republic. They saw themselves as heroes, patriots, defenders of liberty against tyranny. They could not have been more catastrophically wrong. By killing Caesar, they created a power vacuum that plunged Rome into devastating civil war. By eliminating the one man strong enough to hold the Republic together, they guaranteed its destruction. They killed a dictator only to enable the rise of something far more permanent. Augustus, an absolute monarch in all but name, founder of a dynasty that would rule for centuries. Rome's vengeance was marked by bitter historical irony. The old Rome of the senators died with Caesar. It perished in the civil wars that followed, consumed in flames. From those ashes, under Augustus's iron rule, rose the Roman Empire, dominating the Mediterranean world for 5 centuries, spreading Roman law and culture across 3 continents, remembered as one of history's greatest civilizations. And it all began with 23 daggers on the Ides of March. Caesar's spirit had triumphed over his murderers, not through his own hand, but through the loyalty of those who loved him and the cold calculation of an heir who understood that vengeance could forge an empire. The assassins thought they were writing the final chapter of Caesar's story. Instead, they had written the first chapter of something far greater. The Roman Empire, born in blood and vengeance, rising from the Republic's ruins like a phoenix from flame. The Ides of March had indeed changed history, just not in the way the conspirators intended.